Hello and welcome. Not so long ago, we all were at the crossroads between various career choices. We have, I personally hope, come a long way from a time when litigation was seen as the only goal of education at law school. Nonetheless, litigation and the glory that come with it are an oft aspire career goal. With this in mind, the Alumni Association and the Student Bar Association thought that the dialogue between alumni and students could be continued on this theme. We thus curated a talk with four first generation litigators from law school who know what it's like to embark on this roller coaster ride. Our speakers this afternoon are Mr. Rajshekhar Rao from the batch of 1999. After graduation, Raj joined the chambers of Miss Justice retired Indu Malhotra and later the chambers of Sri Gopal Subramaniam. In 2006, Raj set up his independent practice in Delhi, and today he specializes in civil and commercial laws. An avid mooter during his law school days, Raj says that is probably the reason he ventured into litigation. Our next speaker is Ms. Poonkurali B. from the batch of 2009. Kurali was awarded with the gold medal for legal aid work. Apart from her academics and legal aid work, Kurali also was the president of SBA in her final year. She is also the recipient of the Kapila and Nirmal Hingorani Pegasus Fellowship awarded by the Inner Temple Society for the year 2016. Soon after graduating from law school, she joined the practice of Miss Sudha Ramalingam, a family law practitioner and renowned civil liberties advocate in Chennai. In 2014, she set up her own independent practice. Her areas of interest include family law, human rights, and LGBTQIA issues and environmental law. The last of these is a later addition to Kurali's areas of work. While she enjoys all aspects of being a litigating lawyer, she is happiest after a good session of cross examination. Kurali represents clients in various fora, including the Magistrate Court, Family Court, and the High Court. Mr. Vikas NM is our third speaker from the batch of 2008. He also pursued a master's in law and economics in 2009 at EMLE. Vikas claims modestly that his GPA of 5.65 was nowhere close to the highest in his batch. He is also a gold medalist and received the gold medal for best all-round student and outstanding personal achievement. After his master's study, Vikas joined Herbert Smith Freehills and worked in their London, Paris, and Singapore offices. He is now a partner at Keystone Partners and practices in almost all civil courts in Bengaluru. And he also does some work at the Magistrate Court for white-collar crimes. He specializes in arbitration with a specific focus on construction arbitration. He is impaneled as an arbitrator with SIAC, Hong Kong International Arbitration Center, and Nani Palkiwala Arbitration Center. Vikas is an excellent cook. He loves climbing mountains, and he is also a sharp dresser. Vayuna Gupta from the batch of 2018 is our youngest alumni on this panel today. She started her career in Trilegal Mumbai and made a switch and set up her practice in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, when she realized that she did not like corporate work culture and the legal work associated with it. She currently practices in the Gujarat High Court and has also worked at the NCLT Ahmedabad bench and CESTAT as well. Lastly, your moderator for today is Ms. Adurya Harish, a current final year student and president of the SBA. Over to you, Adurya, for the day's proceedings.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Adurya Harish. As the speaker mentioned, I am a final year student and I'm currently the president of the Student Bar Association. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you all in the discussion today and to be moderating the session with such distinguished and illustrious alumni. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the panel, and we're very glad that you joined us in the session today to engage with the student body to answer many of their questions. We know that the litigation practice can be very time consuming and you'll work around the clock most days, but we're glad that you're here and we hope to make the most out of this session. Before I proceed, I want to thank the Alumni Association for organizing this event. The student body, really appreciate your efforts in constantly trying to connect with us and trying to help us in the best way possible whenever we needed help in the most prompt way. So thank you for that. We're very grateful. Moving on, a little about why we insisted on this session in particular, as in the theme of the session, when the Alumni Association reached out to us for our opinion about it, was because when most of us come into law school, we don't know if there's a difference between a first, second, or third generation lawyer. So, but through the journey in the 5 years of law school, in all our professional interactions, one of the most frequently asked questions to us is whether we have a legal background, whether our relatives or our parents are in the legal profession. So this really gets us to think whether this is important and whether the first generation lawyers are at a disadvantage. And even when we work at chambers, we see that the bosses who are second or third generation lawyers have the added advantage of accessing a clientele and getting references and having mentors, and they also know better about the legal landscape. So a lot in our student body, we have a lot of aspiring first generation litigators who have many unanswered questions, and we thought this is the best platform to hear it from you all, who are also first generation litigators who have done extremely well and have had very successful careers so far. So yeah, as was earlier mentioned, we have a very diverse panel, not only in terms of seniority, but also in terms of the cities that they practice in the area of expertise, the area of interest. Like we have an Avid Muta, we have someone who is involved in NGO work, we have a panelist who's done their masters. So I urge the audience to please make the most out of this opportunity, and please send all your questions in through the Zoom chat, and we'll take it up as and when. But if there's no clarifications, we'd like to proceed with the discussion without much ado. Okay. My first question is to the senior most member in the panel, Mr. Rajshekhar Rao. So you joined the profession early on. So can you tell us a little about how your journey has been so far? And obviously the legal landscape has changed a lot since then. So if you can touch upon the trajectory and what we as students graduating in a couple of years can expect from the profession.
Expect a roller coaster ride, as Mani said. And jump in only if you really know you want to do this and you love the law. And there are two ways of looking at it. One is, of course, to love the law, and the other is to love the practice of law. The chances are, if you love the practice of law, you'll probably be happier. If you just love the law, then you might be disappointed on many occasions. So, but yeah, I mean, okay. So my journey has been it's been a fun ride. I've been very fortunate. I did, one serious internship in life, and that was with Justice Indu Malhotra when she was an AOR then. And she was very kind, and she asked me to come back and work with her. Gave me access to one of the finest practices in the Supreme Court from a filing perspective. The added advantage was great boss, gave you a lot of freedom, pushed you, and gave you the ability to interact with a whole bunch of senior counsels, again, who, because of the quality of her work, you dealt with the best names in the business. Just by watching them, just by being around, just by seeing them on a regular basis, I think you learn a lot just by that association. I spent 2.5 years with her, and I was itching to kind of, be pushed a little more. And as luck would have it, Mr. Subramaniam then took me on. Now, I was in an AOR's office, which meant filing, but she was largely a Supreme Court based AOR with some work in the High Court and very little, some work in the Consumer Forum, but otherwise not so much. And that time, remember, arbitration was still a very, very nascent subject, so not too much there. Mr. Subramaniam's office was literally from AOR's office to suddenly looking at a brief that comes in at the last minute, looking at, somebody play with the law, somebody's worked on a matter for five days, 5 weeks, 5 months, and suddenly you add that little extra and the ability to think on your feet. So purely from a learning curve, I think my learning curve shot up considerably. So one is, of course, working with, senior counsels as somebody instructing them from time to time, as opposed to spending literally a substantial part of your day with one man and following him around and seeing him in various aspects, personal and private, and professional in that sense. And the way he conducts himself, the way he ran his office, all of that. Net, I think by the time I was done with Mr. Subramaniam's chambers, I knew I wanted to be a counsel. But obviously, first generation lawyer, you don't get to choose what comes your way. So this next rule was jump out, get out. I was very fortunate. I had Siddharth Agarwal and Senthil Jagdishan, who very kindly gave me the ability to kind of operate out of their office. They gave me discounted rent. Uh, I didn't have to worry too much about expenses. So, what I would have otherwise paid a bomb for, I paid a fraction only because I had two people who were kind enough to kind of give me that flexibility. So we had this lovely arrangement where three of us had independent practices in one setup. When a client came along, if he wanted a big client, suddenly he thought this was a bustling office with three guys and a few juniors. And when he wanted a single lawyer, you told him, "But no, this is my practice, I practice alone." So I think those are the best days of my life. We operated out of a small place in Tolstoy House, 9 floors. So if you called a client after 8:30, you were fine. Till 8:30, you were fine. After 8:30, the lift didn't work. So the clients didn't come up to the 9th floor anyways. So we got to go home early. But I think what it taught me was, okay, first two offices taught me how to deal with the law. Mr. Subramaniam really taught me how to play with the law. And being on my own with these two guys taught me how to enjoy the law and the life of a lawyer. So I must shamelessly admit, when I had no work, unfortunately, I did not sit and read law books. I did not, I did not go looking for clients. I did not go speak at seminars. All of these things are things that perhaps I should have used my time better. Do I regret it? Perhaps not. But the bottom line is this: we started small. Every case that came your way, you tried to give it what you did. And somewhere along the way, the one thing that made a difference, I mean, and I'll just flag that, we can, of course, discuss other aspects later, was legal aid work. So I got the chance to do legal aid work for the Delhi High Court Legal Services Authority in 2007-8. And that, frankly, is what is responsible for me being able to practice in the High Court today. As something as simple as opinion. So Mr. Subramaniam taught us to do opinions in a particular manner. I just translated what I was taught. Ms. Malhotra taught us to draft up petitions in a particular manner. So took those two things. Every free brief came your way, you did exactly that. You treated it like any other brief. And somewhere along the way, the court decided, let's ask him to assist us in this legal aid matter. So I guess for me, the lesson was only this. I took what I was taught. I learned to enjoy the process, and I applied that, unflinchingly to every brief. And somewhere along the way, one brief led to another, led to another. You were doing a legal aid matter in court, perhaps, and some private client saw you argue it, said, "Will you handle a case?" And slowly, step by step, we built it. So that's really it. I didn't think too much. Fortunately, I think the reason I went independent was Sapna and I discovered we were going to have twins. And I realized that if I needed to kind of continue a career in litigation, I ought to be sure that I can sustain a family. And so, which is why I went independent in June of 2006, because the boys were arriving in December. And the first 3 years were horribly hard. I mean, you have no idea how much Sapna has put up with because of my inability to do so many things in terms of, either keeping the fires burning, or giving her time, or just dealing with the frustrations of a fledgling practice. But in hindsight, was it worth it? Of course it was. And I don't regret it. I'll give you snippets of what else happened along the way, but I know we have a short time run today. So let the others kind of tell you their stories, and I'll have many, many more.
That was an interesting narration of what happened. A lot of ups and downs, but nice to hear about the ups. And I think you had a amazingly. It was a great learning curve, and it looked like you had a lot of fun as well. So that's
No, absolutely. And the downs are responsible for us being able to deal with everything today. I think so. I don't forget those days. And I think it just helps you stay grounded. And no matter what you do in life, you remember you're only as good as your last brief. That's the other thing as a litigator. So
that's interesting to know. My next question is for Mr. Vikas. So you did your master's, and then you worked in a foreign law firm. Then you came and started your practice in Bangalore. So was this how you planned it from the beginning, or did it just happen to be that? Can you tell us a little about all the decisions you made and why so?
Firstly, thank you for having this seminar. It's an interesting topic to be talking about. Whether I planned and charted out every single step of my life, no. But I think at every stage, I sort of had an idea that this is what I wanted to do, and I ended up doing that. First, with the masters, I think the masters for me was more a holiday than anything else. It was a fully paid scholarship for the Erasmus Masters, and I said there's no downside to doing it. And by that time, I'd already got my pre-placement offer with Herbert Smith Freehills, and they were willing to postpone it by a year. So I didn't really think too much about my masters. So I don't know if I'm the best person to be recommending people to do masters or otherwise. It just so happened that I ended up doing decently well in the masters. But what that did give me was just a little bit of perspective of, I had friends from across the globe, that network of people that you're able to make, the network of connections that you're able to make, and to see that people from very diverse backgrounds can come in and start doing similar things. That sort of open your eyes to saying it's never too late to do anything. I knew people who were doing my masters at 36, 40, beyond, and they were still people who had left their practice and come in. So then I thought, there are various different ways you can pick out of a master's, and studies is just one of them. Building connections is probably the most important. That's what my key takeaway from that was. After that, Herbert Smith Freehills was fantastic because it was a professional setup like none I had worked in before. I had, for whatever reason, I had not worked in any law firm in my 5 years of law school. So I had not worked with your Ramachands, your Luthras, your Trilegals, nothing in India. And the only practices I'd done were litigation internships. And then when I went on to Herbert Smith Freehills, it was a completely different ball game altogether. And there, it's almost like, they're treating it like they're treating a baby, because they're handling matters of such scale and such complexity that you're not thrown into the deep end at the start. So for me, it was a very different ride in terms of how my initiation to the practice of law started. So with that also came in the experience of, you're not really at the deep end, but you're starting to learn the ropes. You're starting to get to grips with terms. But that changed once I moved to Singapore, because that was a much smaller office. And with Singapore and with 2 partners and sort of 6 associates there, you would then expect to do a lot more. And that is, I think, where my interest to come back to India was increased to a significant extent, because in a very cushy environment like an international law firm, the ability to go and argue, be on your feet were not things that you get to do on a regular basis. I was fortunate enough to do a cross examination in a place like Herbert Smith Freehills, which people don't end up doing until they're in their partnership track. But that sort of again prompted me to think, what is it that I really want to do out of law? And I realized that from being a mooter in law school to the time I was doing the practice of law as a litigation arbitration practitioner, the element of argument, the element of cross-examination was what interested me the most. So that's what prompted me then to make that switch back to India. And at that time I thought, okay, I picked up a few skills here, and I know that there is a demand in the Indian market for those skills. So maybe I can try and plug that gap, try and see to some extent if I can, make two things meet. And that's sort of how I started off in India as well. And even in India, it's not that I immediately knew what I wanted to do. I, in fact, started off with Mr. Pramod Nair in Bangalore with a sort of slightly smaller chamber work. And then I dabbled a little with trying to go independent, where I wasn't working with any chambers for about a year. And then I realized what I actually want to do was marry two worlds. I wanted to marry your corporate style of work with the litigation world. And that's the world I'm in right now, which is at Keystone Partners. It's a dispute specialist firm. We don't do any transactional law, but yet we do the kind of work that I want to be doing. Is, in your arbitration work, your slightly complex, slightly high profile work, where the clients have quite a lot at stake, while yet being grounded. So you're not doing it in thin air where you don't know what the ground realities are. You should know exactly what the troubles are, moving a matter in court, getting the matter listed, getting that particular judge to start looking at things your way. Because unless you're able to do those, whatever castles you might build in the air with these complex matters will not actually see fruition on the ground. So that's the kind of practice that I started building. And I was really fortunate to have a very, very supportive team with Pradeep Nayak and Arun Srikumar and Preeta and Sulabh and Anupama, all of whom are from law school. Sita, who's a non-law school, but excellent support and a great person to be working with, who saw the same world and the same vision. And that was my journey into coming back to law, and that's where I've been for the last 6 years. This is the longest I've worked in a place, in one particular place, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Do I say that there are days that I don't doubt myself as to why I made this decision? Should I not go back to Singapore? Absolutely not. That comes in every other day. You have a bad order in court, you have a judge who doesn't listen to you, you have a matter which is great but simply doesn't get through because of the inefficiencies of the system. You start thinking back to yourself as to why am I doing all of this? But even with all of that, I think the little wins make it all worth the while. That's where I'll probably stop, because otherwise I can speak endlessly forever.
But that's a new perspective actually, because whenever we look at a master's, we always be like, okay, how much can we study? And even when we look at corporate firms, and if we want to get recruited, I think the general fear in the student body is that, okay, we haven't done as many corporate law internships. Are we going to get a job in a corporate firm? So that was a really interesting perspective. And I'm sure we have many questions for you, which we'll come back to. Uh, Ms. Khalidi, um, I wanted to ask you, you have a very specific area of specialization, family disputes and human rights. And other associated things. So how did you make this decision that you wanted to specialize in this area? Was it, can you just tell us what the process was like?
Okay. Hi. So likewise, very, very happy to be part of this panel. I think, I think I've almost forgotten how nice it is to catch up with law schoolites and just to be part of a discussion where somewhere we all look back to something we shared in a, in a common place at some point. So I'm really glad to be here. Thanks to the student body and the Alumni Association for having me here. So mine wasn't a very planned journey really. So it so happened. So I from Chennai, I get into law school, and you know how law school is, where you, in the first year, you get to meet people from your own city. Those are the first, your mentors, your people you bond with. So when I was in my second year, I remember one of my seniors said her mother, who was practicing in Chennai, she was appointed as the amicus by the court for visiting all the women prisons in Tamil Nadu. And she said she was looking for student volunteers. And I jumped right at the opportunity, and I said, why don't I go along? So this was my second year, and I traveled with Ms. Sudha Ramalingam, whose practice I later joined. And this was the October break. So those 15-day break, we traveled to 8 prisons across Tamil Nadu, women prisons across Tamil Nadu. And I do see that as something that really shook me up in terms of just understanding what the criminal justice system was about, what it could do to people. I mean, just to not see one rich person in any of those things. And what were all those women, in there for? This was very specific to women's jails in Tamil Nadu, right? So it opened up my eyes to one part of the, the legal system, the criminal justice system, which law school never would have, allowed me to experience. So that was one and then I did my third year trial internship also. I went back to her office, and later I tried other things. But then when I walked out of, like Mr. Raj said, I think it was around March in my final year that I was visiting Chennai, and I dropped by her office, and she said, so what has happened? What are you doing? What plans? I said, what plans? I'm coming right back here. So, I mean, it was a declaration of sorts. So I didn't really go through any interview, but it was something where I had enjoyed those internships. I think it was very, I also didn't do a single corporate internship. It was one of those things I would keep telling myself, I can't be so averse to something. I should check all the boxes. I should try everything before I make up my mind about, what I really wanted to do. But then I would be, no, not this time. I really like this. Let me try something else in another trial court or some. So that's how it happened. I did do a few NGO internships also. But for me, I think when I didn't walk into law school thinking I wanted to be a litigator. I think I had, I was open to the idea of civil services, but I really started enjoying the law. It was really nice. And my time with the legal services clinic, I also, really also opened me up to just how law interacts with the common man, like how people, basic knowledge about certain things, be just to go register a complaint or just being aware of your rights made such a big difference. I think all those made a big difference had a big role in my decision. So after joining Sudha Ramalingam's practice, she did a lot of human rights work and family law work. And I really enjoyed it in terms of the client I think what trial work entails is that there is a lot of client interaction, and you also get to strategize and lead a case from the very beginning. In terms of the brief is not, at the appellate stage or at a later stage, here you get to speak to the client, you get to strategize as to what would work best for that particular client. So especially in matrimonial law, there may be 2 women who are victims of cruelty, who you may be similar, abuse at home, but their own approach to the matter, their own background in their families, what their support would be. Will they be able to stand an adversarial litigation, or should I advise this person to, mediate and finish? There's so much that's involved even at that stage of a litigation. I began to enjoy those aspects quite a bit. And then, of course, the court aspect of it, and just the joy of being able to convince another human being of your argument and your case. That's a high that I don't think other not all aspects of the legal profession gives you, I'm sure, but yeah, so that's how it's been. And I did that for 4-5 years, and I got a lot of freedom with Sudha Ramlingam's ma'am and, her practice, where, in the second year of practice, she allowed, she gave me the opportunity to appear before a full bench. A reference was there, and she said, you go, you appear. So I was there 2 years into practice before 3 judges of the High Court. But that was a kind of exposure I had there. But then I realized that there is also some additional responsibility and, ownership that comes when you have your own practice, where you're able to own up. Here, whatever, there's something that goes wrong, you have somebody to hide behind or something else to fall back on, but take full ownership of what you are doing to every brief and to do it. I thought being independent would be a good idea. I had all the support from her and family, all that. I think most of us, I'm not generalizing, from a background, where we've got to NLS, have a lot of privilege in terms of what the education affords us, the families, other, and I think it wasn't, I think it's almost, when I saw the title, I must say it hasn't been a very rough ride. I must admit, yes, there have been bad days, bad moments, but if in terms compared to what litigators from various other places, other colleges face in terms of setting up their own practice and all that, I think it hasn't been a tough journey in that sense, in terms of to call it a roller coaster, right? It's been a fun ride. It's been exciting. And just to be able to be open, I think being independent and having your own practice allows you to be, open to all kinds of briefs. You're not like in a firm or in a setup where you're in a specialized area. You then, you only get to do some kind of work. But as an independent litigator, which is Mani was pointing out, like I have some of my areas of interest came much later. So about my 8th year into practice, there just came a brief where somebody wanted to do, wanted me to work on an environment matter. And in fact, I was picking up the Environment Protection Act after my 4th year for the first time then. And the excitement in just understanding something from afresh, from a brief's point of view, and to build that case. And now I work with a colleague, and we have a lot of environment matters that we do together, which I really enjoy, which is like 2 very different areas, right? Like from family law and to do environment law. But that's the independence that having your own practice affords you. So yeah, so it's been a good journey. And the time, I'll speak maybe later about the fellowship in London. That break also, I think, gave me a lot of perspective about how to be professional, like Vikas was pointing out, some of those experiences in terms of how to just be professional, handle your cases in a particular way, taught me a lot.
That's great. It's very comforting to know that your exposure in law school really helped you in having a better journey, I'd say. More questions in that regard, we'll come back to you in a bit. But coming to Ms. Vayuni Gupta, so as you were introduced, they said that you jumped from trilegal, then you chose litigation. So I just wanted to ask you, why litigation and not a corp firm? And was it also, did you make this decision also because of your internships or courses in law school? What was it?
So when I started off with law school, I was told over years that litigation is something which is difficult as a first generation lawyer. And I had almost no litigation internships. I remember I interned once in the Bombay High Court, and that's about it. I did all of my other internships in corporate firms, CAM, SAM, Trilegal, spread out. I joined a law firm as a consequence of natural course of things in law school. Initial 1 month was great because a huge paycheck came at the end of the month, and it was very exciting that yes, I am making money now, and now I'll have a great life in Bombay, and Bombay is fun. It's a lot of fun. But then this was around the period of September when I think the Supreme Court gave all of those 5 judgments before Justice Deepak Mishra retired, which were the Sabrimala, the Navdeep Singh Johar, and all of these judgments came out, and nobody cared in that firm. Like, I was with the team, and it just did not matter to anybody that all of these decisions came out, and it was a huge deal. That made me start to rethink about why I am doing what I'm doing at this point. And it was only after a couple of months that I quit. I came to Ahmedabad. Now, Ahmedabad is a place where I have never interned before. I do not know any advocate. I don't have any family or even friends who can actually tell me which is a good office to join. It took me around 2 months to find an office, especially because a lot of these offices took juniors only based on reference. And some of these offices were not very open to having women juniors, or they wouldn't give the equal amount of opportunities to women juniors. So for this, I had to speak around a lot. Thankfully, there's GNLU here, Gandhinagar National Law School. So I connected with a few people who are first generation who are working here. And I managed to find this one office where my senior, who's Miss Megha Jani, who's also an independent lady advocate, and she does a lot of diverse work. So, and when I went to visit her, she had no vacancy at her place. And I think the only reason she took me is because of NLS. So she said, okay, you've graduated out of NLS, you'll bring something to the table, we can take a chance. And initial few months, she was very skeptical about me as well, but eventually she warmed up to the idea. Judges in the High Court are not, so they started with speaking to me as, yes, what do you want? To now asking me things like, yes, Miss Gupta, what is it that you have to say? The transition took a while. And it was very real because colleagues my age who had come from a legal background were treated more warmly in court just because of the fact that they came from a legal background. So, but I'm not saying that they did not welcome me enough. Like now they listen to what I have to say, and I do not feel that there's any difference between them or me. And my senior now also does a lot of great work. So recently we did this PIL against asking the High Court to frame guidelines against ostracization of women because of their menstrual status. So all these things made me feel that I am doing something as a lawyer towards the society. I am being instrumental to some change, which I should have kept an open mind. And probably I would have done what I'm doing 1 year earlier. It would have been easier because the gestation period is very real in law, and I would have saved 1 year for myself. But apart from all of that, it is very exciting. It is a lot of fun, and I do not regret making that transition, even though Ahmedabad is a really boring city.
Thank you for that. I think this is a perspective that all of us needed. A lot of us are confused whether we should take up corporate jobs or we should go into chambers. So that was an interesting insight. But coming back to Mr. Rao, we heard that you were an avid mooter. I also heard that you were a part of the Jessup team. So we just wanted to know what are the activities in law school? Which activities in law school do you think help you in your practice today? And if you have to suggest the current students in NLS certain events to take part in, which would it be?
Okay, let me start with law school trains you to be a good litigator. Forget the activities. You're lumped into a campus with 350, 400 people, all of whom are reasonably smart. Each one has a different skill set, different viewpoints, and you have to learn to maneuver your way through law school. Law school is not easy. I think we've all been through our various journeys. It can be difficult. It can be a fabulous place, but the fact of the matter is it gives you life skills. So first things first, maneuver law school, you will survive litigation generally. But yes, I mean, why am I a litigator today? I am a litigator because I actually started mooting. I picked up mooting for a lark. One fine evening, I was looking for somebody to go for a movie with, and everybody was doing, the class moot. And this was for the inter-class thing at the end of the year or whatever. I ended up doing it, and then one moot led to another, and I discovered my journey. And I think the second time I did that, I figured that this is probably what I want to do in life. As Punklali says, that I went into law school with no idea why I was in law school. I wrote the entrance because I wanted to go to Bangalore, meet my friends, managed to get into law school. Then, as she says, the standard thing was at that time, chalo, we'll do the civils. I think for the first year, there was this vague thing of doing the civil services. And by the second year, once I started mooting, I knew, I think actually it was more in the third year when I knew I wanted to be a litigator. And this is all I wanted to do. So unlike Vayuna, I did not do like Vikas, I did not do a single corporate internship. Either I did no internships or I did fraudulent, litigating internships, which frankly, like I said, the only serious internship was the Miss Malhotra internship. And that was my last one. So litigation, mooting really helps you. It helps to debate. I think if you do a bunch of writing today, there are a whole bunch of avenues where I think your student bar review, etc., etc. All of these add a different skill set to a litigator's life. We must all remember that not all of us get into practice and start arguing from day one. You are always tested on the quality of your work, whether it is your research, whether it is your written work, whether it is how you articulate a proposition, it's how you engage with an opponent, and how you persuade a court. As Vayuna says, I think most of us remember the first time a judge called us by name, right? And said, "Counsel, what is your name?" And henceforth, at least one judge started calling you by name. Then you said, "Okay, maybe tomorrow more will." And somewhere along the way, hopefully, everybody then starts recognizing you at least for what your name is. But the skill set that you really need is what? The ability to listen as a lawyer. That's the first skill you need. Number two, to assimilate and then to articulate in as short a point in time. And somewhere along the way, I've learned that one of the most important skills is to make that point in as short or brief a manner, and in a manner that makes it interesting for the other person so he or she remembers. So I usually try and start, invariably with a joke or with a line that probably, kind of pegs the point that I'm trying to make as far as the judge is concerned, he or she remembers. A learned senior counsel once told me he'd made a deliberate mistake in a pleading at an opportune point, because he was reading out the pleading and he suddenly said, "Oh, I don't know what my steno has done." The judge said, yeah, I don't know why he's put the name of this actress in the petition. He said, Maharaj, I don't understand. I think I was dictating this point to him and he was thinking of Sridevi. He won the point on the Sridevi point because after that, that entire litigation proceeded on the Sridevi point. So the judge never forgot that point. I think everything else took a backseat. So I think these are little skills. But yes, moot more, read a lot more. I mean, frankly, I was just before we got on, I was regretting the fact that perhaps I didn't pay as much attention to research and reading the law as I would have, I should have done in law school. That's something that I regret. You don't get the time to do it very often. And the great thing about good lawyers is if they've read a case properly once, they never forget. And they always have the ability to recall that at an opportune moment. So these are the little things that set you apart inside a courtroom. So would you rather be the lawyer who says in response to a judge's question, "Oh, there's this judgment and see, this is what it says," as opposed to "let me check and come back to you"? And that's really what mooting taught us. There are instances where a judge has told us something and we've said yes, but that same judge has taken a particular view subsequently and he or she has changed their perspective, their perspective on a little aspect. So that's what I think. Moot, debate, litigate, learn to deal with people. If you learn to deal with people, you don't need to be very smart to be a good litigator. You need to have the ability to work with people. You have to have the ability to persuade somebody to see your point of view, especially when somebody else is trying to interrupt you consistently and to prevent you from getting your point across. As Vayuna says, the biggest challenge is to walk into a new courtroom, meet a new judge who does not know who you are, and to use the skills at your command to try and persuade him or her to A, give you relief, and B, to remember you the next time. And if you have that approach to life, I think as a litigator, more often than not, you will succeed. I don't think then you can't be, there will be no missteps. You may not win all your cases, but not every lawyer wins all his cases or her cases. But at the end of the day, lawyers are remembered for what they do and how they articulated their positions. That's all that matters at the end of the day. It doesn't matter who wins, loses. Winning is important, but it's how you played the game, right? And more often than not, just to give you an example, just as of yesterday, I was in a case where I had a tough case. I was trying to persuade a judge who was completely against me. And I think after 2 compilations of case law, he perhaps was reasonably willing to see my point of view, but still not convinced. He put the one clause I was arguing to my opponent, and my opponent said, "Oh, please forget that. You look at this clause and this is what it means." That clause had nothing to do with the point the judge was asking. The judge said, "Are you sure this is what you want to say?" The guy articulated it again, and the judge looked at him, lost his cool, and said, "We don't expect counsel to make irresponsible or absurd arguments, because then we remember counsel as people who make irresponsible or absurd arguments. If you had fairly stated that I don't have a response, maybe I'll come back to you. I may still have forgiven you. But the fact that you were trying to justify a bad point merely because you thought I was with you is what kind of gave it away. And I got an injunction. And that too, it was a mandatory injunction. So that's what. So I think grab all you can from what law school has to offer. You should know what you want to do eventually. But as far as litigation is concerned, I think everything that you do in law school will some way or the other help you. Barring, it's not just mooting, it's not just being a part of the L&D society or whatever. I think it is just the way you are. And also remember, whatever you do ultimately reflects on law school. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I remember coming into litigation and a lot of us faced a lot of flack because supposedly people from NLS used to carry a huge chip on their shoulder. So we then we swallowed the chips and, kind of ate them all up and kind of found our feet slowly. stay grounded, stay focused, and yeah, enjoy the ride. I guess that's it. Yeah. I mean, like I mean, lots to say in the sense of what it teaches you. But like I said, I mean, everything that I do today, in some way or the other, I can relate back to something I did in law school. Whether it's a moot, whether it's an interaction, whether it's a conversation, or merely because of the way I said something and it, there was a backlash. I've learned something from that experience. But yes, purely as a litigator, 3 skills: moot, read. If you can write, please. And yes, now there are avenues. Make your presence felt. A good article will get you enough networking opportunities in that sense. You don't need to network. Perhaps that article speaks to you and you will get opportunities in that sense. You do a good brief, you're going to do a good argument, and you have the ability to kind of, just, it's work follows good work. I mean, I think that's the principle. And for all first generation lawyers, is the magnet that kind of attracts all the other, future pieces of iron, as it were.
I think your response would have made all the young mooters and debaters very happy, and it will be motivating a lot more to join in. But coming to Mr. Vikas, one of the biggest challenges as a first generation lawyer is to build your clientele. So can you tell us how it was, and did you have a mentor from law school or after that?
I don't think I have the answer to that yet. Every day as a litigating lawyer, I think you feel, when is my next brief going to come? Because you have no assurance of work. If you tell me today, I mean, we as law firms, we end up making budgets, we make projections, you need to make X, Y, Z, whatever. But if you really ask me, okay, you have said X, but who are the clients who are going to give you X? I don't know. And I think, as Raj was saying, it's about building that brand value. It's about building that name and hoping that good name carries and that gets you the work. In that, I think, is probably the most stark distinction between being a second generation lawyer and a first generation lawyer. Whereas as a second generation lawyer, it's not only the good repute that you've built, but it's probably the generations before you who have built that repute that carries it for. And there is benefit to it, right? Because there's a trust element. And what you'll see with a lot of lawyers out there in the market is not that they're not capable. A few of them are capable, but I think there is a trust deficit. People don't trust their own lawyers to either be prudent, commercially viable, or any of those things. So for them, there's an inherent distrust. So they gravitate towards someone who may not be technically the best person, who may not be the most articulate, but someone whom they can trust because generations before them have trusted their family. And I think that's why the first generation lawyer will have a little bit of a setback, but it's not a barrier that cannot be broken. I think it's slowly about chipping away at that, trying to make your mark in the cases that you've argued. Like Raj was saying, if you argue a point well in court, whether it's for a paid client or an unpaid client, it doesn't matter. There will be other people in the courtroom watching you, and that makes a difference, and that gets people to start coming and brief you. You have a network of your peers, and in current days, right, it's no longer only your granddad companies that are being run. There are a lot of new age companies that are coming in, a lot of tech companies which are coming in, which are a lot more open to experimentation. They don't necessarily want to go through someone who their fathers have given matters for 5 generations. They're willing to experiment a bit more. So I think it is a little bit easier now than it was maybe 20, 30 years ago. Is it easy? Absolutely not. Is it something that you get over at any point in time in your litigation life? I don't think so. At least I haven't. I hope at some point in time I'll get to a point and say, I'll have a steady source of income and I'm assured of it. But I don't think I am there yet. And I don't think it's an aspiration that you need to chase very actively. You just do your bit, something will happen. Somehow things will work for you.
Thank you for that comment, sir. Ms. Punkal Ali, I wanted to ask you, a lot of us are in this dilemma whether we should be interning or later pursuing a career in our own parent high court. For instance, some of the students may come from a smaller city where and they are confused whether they should just start working or interning in their parent high court or move to bigger cities like Delhi or Bombay. So how important is it to stay in, what are the benefits and how important is it to stay in your own parent high court, and what are the benefits of moving out?
I think as a first generation lawyer, it does make a lot of sense to see if you can build your practice in your parent city, and to maybe even eventually look to come back there if you were to set up a practice. I think, Bombay or Delhi could be places where your initial exposure and, to certain things could be. But in terms of just building a practice, I think it makes a lot of sense to come, not that you cannot do it in these other cities, but from 2 points of view. I think one is the language. I think, especially if you're from if you're not from a Hindi speaking state, it matters to be able to communicate with clients for trial work and all of that, to know your local language, your mother tongue. So I think that is a big advantage if you're there in your home city and practice. And secondly, even as a first generation lawyer who doesn't even, you don't have like briefs being handed down to you and you don't have something to walk into, I think to slowly build, to have a network of people whom you will know, who will then know you as a lawyer, who will start trusting you with briefs and referrals, being in your hometown makes a big difference. So while I did have, other lawyers, friends, various others referring me matters, I think the fact that I was in Chennai mattered to me, even to tap into my other circles, people knowing that, I am here and I'm practicing. So I think it does. So I think people should try interning at least once in their home cities to test how comfortable they are, how much they like that. Yes, there is a question. I mean, it is a toss up between exposure and, in terms of the kind of cases, the courts available, all of that. Yes. But I think being in your hometown does have a lot of advantage, and people should consider that.
Thank you for that tip. Moving on to Ms. Vayoni Gupta, I just wanted to know, a lot of times we hear that where for women practitioners, it's a little more challenging because sometimes the colleagues are very discriminatory. Is that true? And have you had any instances or experiences in this regard?
So colleagues in my office have not been discriminatory, because my office generally is known as an office which promotes women advocates. So usually in office, I'm told that you get an advantage because you're a woman and you are in this office. That's the usual narrative in this office. But otherwise, yes, I have heard that there are offices around me where women are not given the opportunity to go argue and stand in front of court often enough. They usually do their drafting, or they're given a lot of drafting work, but that's where it ends. A lot of realistic problems with respect to women arguing and giving time to litigation eventually arise, but those are more at a personal level. At least as of now, I do not have complaints of because I am a woman, except for the fact there's some offices which were not willing to accept women. Over and apart from that, nothing else. So even if you're a first generation female advocate, the situation currently is great. It is not as horrible as it used to be. Yes, there are very few women in the bar, very few designated seniors, even in the Gujarat High Court. But I feel it is very doable, depending on the hard work, and it will not be restricted because of the gender.
Yeah, that's good to know, but we hope that the situation gets better and we choose chambers wisely as well. Coming to Mr. Rao again, of course, the career trajectories differ from person to person, but can you tell us approximately how long it takes for a first generation litigator to be able to sustain their own expenses, and especially in the bigger cities when the pay is so less? And how much savings should one have if they want to start practicing litigation right out of law school?
That's a tough one. Yeah. Okay, it's a lot better today. I think the bigger cities, at least the younger lawyers, are paying better. A lot of the senior counsel pay a lot of money today. So it's not as tough. Even when I started it, I think I was reasonably privileged. I started, Ms. Malhotra used to pay us about 6,500 rupees a month in '99. That was a king's ransom. At least you could live in a Barsati and still manage to kind of just cover yourself. Not possible today. My friend Siddharth, I think, was being paid about 2,000 rupees. So, look at the stark difference in our numbers. And of course, there was a whole bunch of people who weren't paid at all. In terms of how long does it take you to become self-sufficient, I think at least I remember I was borrowing money from my parents till I was about 12, 13 years at the bar. I mean, it's not that I wasn't making money. There would be periods where you weren't making money. You would have to dip into your savings, which weren't too much. And at times you'd borrow from your folks, repay them back. And again, 8 months later, you are back saying, can I just get a short-term loan? But that's the difference, right? And there is a point where you're not making any money at all. And somewhere along the way, it becomes a reasonably steady flow. So you're comfortable. A lot of us have obviously curtailed our lifestyles. We couldn't afford to do a lot of the things that people who went to a merchant did early days. or we had great friends who kind of, paid for us, and it didn't matter. That's the camaraderie. But of course, you do that twice, you do that thrice, but the fourth time it starts hankering, it starts bothering you that you can't kind of reciprocate. So if you're looking to litigate, it's definitely, I mean, the idea is don't compare yourself with anybody else. You have to find a lifestyle that you think you can sustain and live within your means to the extent possible. And always remember, so this is something that Senthil used to keep telling us, just because you've had a good month this month, don't splurge all the money you have, because you might not have a good month next month, the month after. And whatever you do, you will still have a minimum steady flow of expenses, right? In today's day and age, even if you don't have a car, and I used to travel by bus for the first 2 years of my life. It was like an hour and a half in the morning and about an hour and a half to 2 hours at night. Those were my bus rides. And if I had to take an auto, it was $100 from where I lived to where I came, and it didn't make sense. So things like that. So, but like I said, the point that Vayuna was making, choose your chamber wisely. Before you get in, look at these aspects. There are chambers which at least pay you enough to take care. I don't think I pay my juniors as well, at least freshers, etc. I try and take care of them in various ways. But over the years, I've learned not to make mistakes that, probably have happened in the past. But I know for a fact I've had at least one junior of mine who left litigation despite being, having all the characteristics of a good litigator, because I couldn't support him and his parents had pulled the plug. And that is one of my biggest regrets. Today, at least I have the ability to take care of them, and I find my way to kind of ensure that they're not at least dependent on their folks for their basic requirements. Everything else, is a function of what your needs are. But safe estimate, anything from 7 to 10 years, realistically. And if you're lucky, it's 5. But yeah, I mean, I think 10 years is a very realistic assessment. So imagine getting into litigation saying, I will live a boxed life. I will not be able to splurge. I may not be able to take big vacations for the next 10, 12, 15 years, after which perhaps you may not have to worry about anything, but you may not have the time there. So it's about that work-life balance that somewhere along the way one needs to do it. Somebody had a question. I'll just address that in terms of, this whole business of where do you start? Should you start in the trial court or should you start in the appellate court? I think it's a function of what makes you comfortable, but I definitely believe a trial court start is great. And especially with, jurisdiction going up and a lot of the good work also going into the trial courts and the quality of trial court judges also getting much, much better. There is definitely some merit there, and which is the point that Punklali was also making, that maybe it makes sense to start where you are and then slowly find your way into bigger cities. At least you have a home, you have a roof over your head, your expenses are minimal, and you have the ability to find your space within a trial court network and do something different. Those judges have seen a particular way of life and a particular way of practice for the last 70 years. Would you be the first one to show them that it can be done differently? And if you are the guy or the girl who, assists a judge in a manner where the judge realizes that his or her job has become easier, that's then opening that, that opens doors in ways that you will never imagine. So take all the advantages that you can. And not everybody needs to start in the Supreme Court. In fact, I spent 7 years in the Supreme Court and then went back to the trial court for a couple of years to at least understand how these things play out. Because you can draft beautifully, you can argue, but if a client came to you to, for advice on how to structure a litigation from bottom up, suddenly you were found wanting. So original side challenges you in many, many ways. I think Vikas and I do arbitrations for that reason. You do heavy duty trial work in a compressed time frame, and it tests your skills as a lawyer. Very challenging, great fun. And frankly, once you start doing that, then you've tasted blood.
Thank you for that, Mr. Rao. Mr. Vikas, the next question is for you. Do you recommend students to pursue their LLMs or any masters? And do you think that helps in the litigation practice? And on the side note, how important is it to maintain a good CGPA in this regard? Because we are very often told that if you're litigating, your CGPAs don't matter. So, yeah.
See, I'll answer the last question first. That's the correct statement. Your CGPA doesn't matter because no one in court is going to ask you what your CGPA is, right? But I think what does matter is if you have paid attention in class, a lot of what you've learned at some point in time will become relevant. And to be perfectly honest, the amount of time you have while on a litigation brief is actually quite limited because you end up doing quite a lot of matters. So you don't have that much time to go in depth. So if you have a foundational level of understanding of core concept of your contract law, of your tort law, of your corporate law, it makes a huge difference because then you're able to go on from there and start doing your in-depth research, which is necessary for your case. So I don't think it's a direct correlation between a CGPA and the litigation career, but I think it would be wrong to say that I can do whatever it is I want in my law school life and then still be able to do brilliantly well, because that will require a superhuman effort. I'm not saying that's not possible. I mean, we have seen a lot of people who have done that, who have chilled through their 5 years of law school, who are still doing fabulously. But I think it will require you to be superlatively focused and devoted post law school for you to do that. It's not that these people haven't done it. It's just that they've done it after law school. So if you want to chill, if you want to do nothing in your law school, just ensure that whatever Raj is talking about, the 10 years that you're talking about, not being able to fend for yourself, probably going to get extended a little bit longer, because at some point in time, you have to do it. About masters, I don't know. I'm a little cynical in this. I'm cynical, but I mean, I see there are some positives. Firstly, for litigation, I don't think masters in itself makes a huge difference, because it's not, at least the way the masters are done. Either you're going to be doing your masters in a UK or a US, and there, whatever you're learning is not likely to be very relevant to your practice in litigation in Indian law. Maybe some amount of theoretical foundation, theoretical concepts that are established in some of your more theoretical masters might actually come in handy. I haven't really been a beneficiary of that, so maybe I'm cynical unnecessarily for those things. So I don't think there's a direct correlation between what you learn in your masters and your litigation career. But I absolutely 100% recommend people do it for simply the reason that, like law school, the world is a diverse place. I was very privileged to be in law school. And I think one of the biggest advantages for me to be in law school was that I came from a city where everyone was like me, from a same background, from the same kind of family, from the same kind of upbringing, to being in a place where people came from different states, different upbringings, different kind of mentality. And that made a huge difference to me as a person. And I think that is amplified in a master's, especially in an international master's, where you see people from significantly different backgrounds. And that network and circle of friends ultimately might help, benefit you even in your professional life, because work might come in from there. But even otherwise, I think it makes some difference in terms of you just opening up your worldview. So I think even if that minimal reason is there, it makes a significant difference to do a master's. The cost benefit is a different question altogether. We can't answer it in the limited time there is, but I think there is some merit to it.
Thank you for that, Mr. Vikas. Ms. Punkalali, I just wanted to know that if you had any mentor throughout your law school experience or after law school who guided you on what to do, when to do, and how to do it, is mentorship important for first generation litigators?
So I don't think I had a single mentor really who, through my law school time at law school, but I do think a lot of seniors and were very, very generous with their time and, sharing their experience, guiding me on internships. So it does, I think that's the nice thing about law school, right? To be able to, even for people who were not at that time at law school, who had graduated, one could reach out to them, talk to them to find out about their experience, learn from that for internships or various other things. So one could keep in touch with so I was in touch with seniors who were in their 5th year when I was in my 1st year, and they had already gone to some other offices, and I could talk to them about their experience. So I do think mentorship matters a lot, to have those seniors whom you can call upon for advice. Just pick up the phone and say, I don't know what to do, I'm stuck in this. I think those things do matter a lot. I mean, and I do that till date. I mean, it's not just something like, right out of law school. So I think it is good to have somebody whom, to fall back and who will be there to pick you up, and, not just, it could be legal advice. It could be, what do I do next? I'm stuck here. It could be anything. I think it matters quite a bit.
I think that was an important point, especially for the first years attending the session today, because they joined an online format of education, and I think it's harder to interact with seniors. But yeah, take this opportunity to urge all the juniors who haven't been able to meet us to reach out to all the seniors whenever you need help. Even the alumni, in fact, are very helpful in that regard. But moving on to Ms. Vayuna, I want to know if you could go back in time to to when you were in law school and change one thing that you perhaps think will help you in your practice today. What would it be?
I think I would have done a lot more of litigation internships in Delhi and in Ahmedabad both, so that I could be in a better position to make an informed decision as to where I want to begin my practice, and also have some idea about the bar, about how it functions and which seniors I should join. I would have saved myself a lot of time. Apart from that, law school in itself was a lot of very diverse and a lot and learning experience. So nothing else, just the fact that I should have done more litigation internships, a lot more.
Thank you for that. Mr. Rao, back to you. I just wanted to know, what is it like? What is a typical day of a litigation lawyer like, and how do you balance your personal and professional life?
Thank God my wife's not here. Okay, you don't have a life, you don't have a personal life, but I mean, that's not true. You have a life, you have the life that you want. And you can, I mean, so that's the point that Punklali was making, that, you know, you have the ability to say no to work. You can take on as much work as you want to. But realistically, yes, I mean, very rarely do you have time off. But fortunately, you know, our courts are structured like schools and our vacations coincide. And while I probably didn't take a proper vacation for the first 10 years of practice, uh, a learned senior counsel who literally kind of, you know, mentored me as I went along, uh, made it his responsibility to teach me the joy of a vacation. And he, every time he would catch me, he'd say, "Are you taking a break this time? Are you taking a break this time?" And I think come 2009 June onwards, I've ensured that I've never worked in June, right? So whether it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever it is, but you switch off, you spend time. And then over the years, we found the ability to take short breaks. So long weekend, you plan in advance, you know, courts give you enough of that leeway. But yes, on a regular week, uh, there are days when your day starts at 5 and goes on till 1 in the morning. There are days when, you know, you have nothing to do and you can chill. The pandemic that way, in a sense, has been a blessing in disguise. I have not seen my kids as much as I have seen them over the last 1 year. So despite everything else, I have never had 3 square meals a day with my family in donkey's years, right? I have not managed to find time to just sit and aimlessly watch a movie with my boys. So all of those are factors. But and the learning that I think I'm taking away after all of this is, I will continue to at least do my Zoom calls and my conferences on through Zoom on the weekends. Otherwise, I was at work pretty much 7 days a week, and I live in Gurgaon. I work in Delhi, so it's an hour long drive. So if you are out of the house, you're out of the house. I mean, you know, even if you have to go out for a meal at night, Sapna comes out and we go out together. There's no question of me coming back, changing. So things like that. But I think, at least speaking for myself, because it consumes your life, it defines who you are. And that's why I started by saying, if you don't enjoy the ride, if you don't enjoy, you know, being a lawyer, don't do it. And I mean, I when I hear Vayuna speak the way she does, it reminds me of my, you know, my initial days when I was completely in love with it. I used to, I mean, you know, now at least at this age, you feel jaded once in a while. And there are, like Vikas says, questions every third morning you wake up and say, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Those are questions. It's good to have those questions. But Vayuna, thank you. I think you've just inspired me to kind of go back to feeling like that, you know, push that little point extra. You know, don't think that you look stupid because you're making that argument. That's the spirit with which at least I entered the law. We did moots where somebody, you know, on a surrogacy contract, somebody argued that the surrogate was a Bailey. Now try making that argument inside a court of law and somebody may just slap you because just the sheer morality or the immorality of the nature of the argument. But the fact is, you were pushing boundaries. And I think, see, that's what law school has at least taught me, to push boundaries, to never take no for an answer. It has taken a small town boy and taught him to look at the world very differently. And it would be a shame if we didn't do justice to that campus. So that's the point. And which is why there are days when I don't go to work, I feel antsy. If I don't see the courtroom more than a couple, you know, if I don't see it for more than 2-3 days, I start feeling weird. So, and it's not insecurity. I know there will be work, etc. It's just that you don't feel complete unless you walk into a courtroom and argue. The difference is today we are doing this, you know, on a screen. But even if you don't have to have the ability to see a judge, meet a colleague, have that cup of coffee, each of these aspects kind of leads to an overall experience. And that part of your vacation in your personal life, remember, you're spending 18 hours of your day at work. You better like it. And remember, if you work very hard, later in life, you can take 5-week long vacations without having to worry about the next one. So we are all aspiring to that life. In the same time, enjoy the little joys that come your way. And but if you ask me what were the best days of my life, it was the days spent in Z17. We were 3 young lawyers with a few of our juniors. We spent a lot more money than we earned. And every time Amarchand announced his bonuses, we went out and got drunk and woke up the next morning asking ourselves, why did we spend money yesterday? Oh, because we weren't making money, right? But we loved it. We had support systems. Each of us, even today, supports each of us in some weird way. We are connected. And if you want to litigate, and Vayuna, I mean, I'm sure you have your set of friends, but if you have a set of people who are like-minded, who are around you, who you can reach out to, you can talk to, then I think you're sorted. You don't really need to worry about anything else. Everything else works itself out. Somebody may make it faster. Somebody may take 2 years later. Somebody may take 5 years later. But at the end of the day, each of you will get where you have to get. Now, where you want to be is a function of what you want. So that's what litigation is about. I mean, the sky's the limit. We know people who are fabulous at what they do, but who've decided that they will maintain a work-life balance. There are people like me who had their lives sorted at the beginning of their career. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Once I came into lit, I wanted to go independent in 5 years. I want to do this. And somewhere along the way, I realized that the only thing that matters is do what you enjoy. Do it because you enjoy it. And as long as you're seen as a good lawyer and as a good human being, the rest, frankly, is fluff.
Thank you for that. Thank you for painting a realistic picture. I think all of us will crib less when we have 6 or 8 hours of class, because it's nothing compared to what is expected of us once we leave college. But yeah, then moving on, the next question is from one of the attendees. It's for Ms. Kulali. So what was it like to leave while practicing for your fellowship?
Yeah, so it was a tough decision, really. Like when I applied, I wasn't even thinking about what I'll do if I got it. So it's a 8-week fellowship in London. And I had, so my daughter was just about a year old when I applied for the fellowship also. So I wasn't even sure I would take it up if I got it, because I wasn't sure I could leave her for that long and go. But when it did come through, I think it mattered that I had colleagues who were willing to pitch in and say, look, it's 8 weeks, it's 2 adjournments a case at the most, the pace at which some cases really move in these courts, and we will take care of it. That's what, like Raj was saying, it's very important to have those bunch of people around you who are like-minded, who will chip in and, to work with you, even if it's not a firm in a traditional sense, but to have a practice, to have colleagues who will work, so I think that really helped. And the 2 months, it was a great break from the everyday, what was happening. I think it was 2016. So I had been independent for about 2 years at that point. And it did expose me to a huge number of other things, ways of thinking about a case. So after running to 3 different courts, and running around, I was like, my first 1 week, I was just with one barrister who had been working on the same case for the last month. And he said, and he was preparing for a final hearing that was going to happen, 2 months down the line. And this was at Blackstone Chambers. And so you were exposed to and I was there through the Brexit hearings. So it was a very interesting time to be in the London courts, because I got to see all those Brexit challenges, so it was a good break to have. And also, unlike an LLM where I had toyed with the idea of doing an LLM at different points, and I said, not now, and it had just gone. But this was a very, in terms of the time, because it was just 8 weeks, it was not too big a break. And it also was a more practical, application oriented kind of a fellowship where I was working with barristers in chambers in London. So it gave me a good insight into what the system there was. And just in terms of the thoroughness of the work etiquette, professionalism, I learned quite a bit from those, 3 different chambers spread over 8 weeks. And it was well worth the break. And my daughter is 5 now, and she doesn't even remember I was away for 8 weeks. So it was well worth the break.
Thank you for sharing this great experience with us. Since you're running out of time, I'll quickly move to the last question, and that is to Vayona from one of our audience. So, how can we decide whether we should go for litigation right out of law school or first join a corporate firm and see if we like it or not, and then go for litigation?
So the money in litigation initially is less. It's a fact. Now, if you start with a law firm initially, it gives you the monetary bandwidth to not have to ask parents for money. That is also true. And it also gives you the added advantage of knowing whether you like it or not. Now, against this, the fact that litigation has a gestation period is also very true. So if you give 1 year to a law firm and start with your second year, it means you're starting from nil in litigation. So it means that you'll have to probably put in that one additional year, but also that one additional year doesn't matter in the larger course of things. So if you're somebody who's confused and wants to figure it out and try corporate first and then move to litigation, it is okay. And if you're somebody who's already sure, then that is also fine that you begin with litigation right out of law school. Because even if you hate corporate, you have the money. So it's not the worst bet.
Okay, I think some of us have also opted for that route, and hopefully we'll come back to litigation soon enough and don't get stuck up in the corporate firms. But if none of you have further questions, I'll save the rest for a written response since we're running out of time. But yeah, I'd like to thank everyone present in the panel today for taking time out to be here. This is one of the highest participation we've seen for an event, especially during class hours. I think we have fewer number today as compared to the registration because there are classes going on. But the fact that all of them stayed throughout the lecture should show how useful and helpful it was. And we only hope that you'll come back to have more of these. And these career sessions have been great. They've actually given all of us a perspective that we needed. And considering it's online, it's all the more better because all of us can access it at different points in time. So thank you all. And we hope to catch up another time in some session. Over to the Alumni Association.
Thank you, Adurya.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Adurya. Thank you, Raj, Vikas, Kurali, Vayuna, and Adurya for your time today. It was enlightening to learn of your life stories and how these shaped your journey as a litigator. I know I've had conversations with some of you, especially Raj and Vikas, but it was fun to know. I think Vayuna's energy was energizing. I mean, it really was. Thank you also for reminding us of the privilege of being a graduate of the NLSIU Bangalore. That privilege, I think it gives us a better starting point than it does to a lot of other people. And we should remember that we have a better starting point in life and use that to our advantage. I hope that your experiences will encourage more people to join litigation. Thank you also to our audience for joining on a Saturday afternoon. Your questions have added nuance to this conversation and shed light on some of the things that current generation is eager to find out about. We hope that these conversations between alumni and current students will continue in the future. Thank you once again, everyone, for your time.